Welcome to the Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. This episode is intended for listeners 21 plus. In this episode, I connect with two great Canadian cannabis retailers and talk about their retail concepts, merchandising strategies, and business insights. First up, Stephen Fry, CEO of Sessions Cannabis, recorded live at his newest location in the East End of Toronto. We talk about his indoctrination into the industry as an Ontario lottery winner, early partnership with High Tide Cann Cabana, and now opening up his new Sessions brand cannabis stores in Ontario. Stephen shares his growth strategy, savvy insights into merchandising, recreational cannabis, and the retail strategies that will make his brand one to watch. Next, live from Vancouver, Corey Gillon, CEO of Choom Cannabis Company, a lifelong retailer with extensive Canadian global experience in large-scale operations, international M&A, and digital e-commerce. Corey takes us through a rich retail career path, and then we delve into Choom. With 15 stores, 3 under construction, based on a story brand strategy and a powerful community, the role of culture and how we translate the brand into the retail sales floor is what we spend our time talking about. But first, let's jump into my conversation with Stephen Fry from Sessions Cannabis. Stephen, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for hosting me. We were at your store out here on Kingston Road in Toronto.
In the Beaches community, that's right.
It's we'll get to talking about that a little bit later, but why don't we start out talking about your personal and professional journey, such an interesting background on how you got into the cannabis business.
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky lottery recipients back in January of last year, so I'm thrilled to be in this space. Prior to this, I've always been an entrepreneur by trade. An MBA, I worked as an executive in healthcare, and when I saw the opportunity come up to get into the first round lottery process, I said, why not do this? I mean,
sure.
$75, an email address, and here you have it, right? So I remember that day I was sitting around my kitchen counter, and sure enough, I get the email from AGCO saying, you've been awarded this opportunity. And
you've won the lottery.
Ever since that time, like I say, they call the dog days of cannabis. Every day has been a week for me, and I've learned tremendous amount of knowledge. I say to people now that I feel like I've forgotten more than most people know in this space in such a short amount of time.
Right.
It's been about a year and a half now, a year and a month or so.
And your first venture with the lottery was in Hamilton, and you went in with the folks from Cann Cabana.
Correct,
right?
Correct. Yeah. So I was proud to be the first store to open up in Hamilton. I pushed extremely hard to make that happen. We set our sights on April 20th, which is synonymous with cannabis consumers, right?
420, right on.
I wanted to make that happen, so we worked day and night. We had construction crews working overnight, every night, pushing a lot of favors from the city to get the permitting in and working with the municipal offices there. So it was a fast track to get that thing open. It was tremendously successful.
Yeah, I saw that now that they have taken that store, right? That's not your store anymore, and they put some numbers in their press release. It looked like you were doing really well there.
I think we were one of from the knowledge I have, and again, the information is largely limited in what the government shares, but I believe we were the highest or second highest selling in terms of quantity of cannabis in the country. So that store is tremendously successful, and I attribute that largely, one, having a good partner at the table with me early days. Yep. Two, having a lot of community outreach and involvement. I mean, there's often in the news to pump up, getting knowledge. And then three, just working extremely hard to engage with the customers and get open as fast as possible.
So let's talk about Sessions. Let's talk about the Sessions model, how you go to market. You have a store as well in Collingwood,
correct?
If I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
and you've got a couple of stores on your website that are on the dock, and so we'll talk about
sure.
kind of plans for the future.
Sure.
As I said, we're in this beautiful store downstairs. I tour a lot of stores, so congratulations, nice vibes, nice store. But tell me about the Sessions model. How does it work, and what have you set up?
Yeah, Sessions was founded by myself and my business partner, and we wanted to create a brand that was more about embracing the community. So we wanted to get away from Canada this or Canada that, and just talk about something that's a bit more subtle. And I think that anybody that's in the cannabis community understands what a session is, right? Getting together with a group of people and consuming the product, enjoying the friendship and the camaraderie that comes along with that. So we created this brand about being really engaged in the community and really trying to improve the consumer experience. We know that in the long run, this game is going to be about winning over the hearts and minds of consumers. So we're trying to take things a little bit differently and take some of the learnings from the players that have been in this game a little bit longer. And I use the analogy of going from good to great, and that's what our mission is. Right. That's the mission we're on.
So I think that, and how do you translate that into the merchandising you do? I mean, as you say, in the fullness of time, in the very early days, very young industry, right?
Yes.
We were just talking off mic about that. I mean, this industry is months old, literally. So,
literally.
And then the first 6 months was like, I'm going to sell whatever I can get because it's hard to get product. Those days are starting to change, and
You got it.
So now you get to decide things like, what am I going to stand for, and what kind of merchandise am I going to carry, and importantly, what am I not going to carry, and what am I going to look like? What lens do you look at that when you think about the Sessions brand and what you're going to carry and what you're going to represent?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, I think we're unique in that respect because we're one of the few companies that aren't tied to existing licensed producers. So I know a lot of other retailers out there have relationships and deep relationships, largely with financial backing, that have some loose commitments to carry their product, versus we're more agnostic. We want to carry the highest quality product. We know consumers are looking for high THC, so we look for the products that don't have large spread in their THC levels. One day you could order product A and it comes in at 8% THC, the next day it's at 22%. So we've used the data, we've used our knowledge and scraped websites like Reddit and consumer reviews to figure out what is the best quality the consumer is looking for and what products most compete with the black market, so that when our consumers come in, they get the products that they're most looking for, and that they'll come back to purchase time and time again.
Right. So already I can see that you've kind of honed in on what your consumer is going to be like, because those are decisions, right? Those are decisions merchants get to take, because part of that, and I want to get your thoughts on it, is, again, in the fullness of time, you're going to have to convince someone to drive past 2 other cannabis stores to go to your cannabis store. It's funny to think of that these days. You just got to go try and find one, but it won't be long. We're in Ontario. It's going to be 300 store plus market, right? So, how do you think about what it's going to take to win and to compete? Is it that connection of those things? I
think I mentioned earlier, it's about winning over hearts and minds, right? So I think our advantage right now is that we're all about embracing the community, right? So we look for local suppliers, we look for local contractors, local sign companies, what do you want to call it? So we really want to get ourselves immersed in the community. We want to find ways to do cross promotion with local companies. We have a flower shop next door as an example here. We've approached them about, bring a receipt in and we'll give you a discount cannabis for the consumers. So we want to be known as the community-based guys. What we stand for is much against what big corporate stands for, right? We're trying to be more of the indie or the mom and pop, but have some structure around that and still be a scalable brand that's recognized across the province. Right?
So you want some uniformity around the execution and the foundation, but kind of flex to the community. I think Collingwood's very different from this community, right?
Yeah, I guess we're trying to go for a lot of people use the analogy of the Apple Store for cannabis. That's not us. We're looking for more of the Timmy's coffee time look and feel. We want to keep it sophisticated, fun, bright, energetic, but we want to get rid of some of those frills that you see in other stores that are popping up. So we want to be competitive.
Which is your merchandising decision, right? You're going to
That's right.
One way or the other. Some other stores are going to go down a different path, but these are all decisions you get to make, right?
Yes. So it's all about how we differentiate. And I think,
which is why I can see why you would work with Raj at Cann Cabana, because that's very much their ethos as well, right?
Yes. I think that's one thing that we've learned from Cann Cabana, which is great. I think we've taken that and built upon some of those learnings. Is they're one of the few companies early days that had the product on the floor, and again, we're in the retail space, so I think it's important to maximize your sales floor and to have product on display. So we've gone the same strategy as Cann Cabana, and I think we've proved upon it a little bit, but. Our approach is, show the product on the floor, have the consumer see what they're buying. And, I look at a lot of the competitors out there, and most competitors, in fact, they hide the product in the back room and they pick from the back. It reminds me of 1960s LCBO. That's what it reminds me of. It reminds me of going in, filling a little sheet, and then somebody's delivering your product versus having the conversation on the floor and building your basket on the floor. So we've learned that knowledge from Cann Cabana, and now I think we've taken that and improved upon it significantly.
So tell me about your business model, because I was trying to get my head around, are you a franchise, but you're not really a franchise? Is it a franchise model? And just unpack that a little bit for me.
Yeah, so we've evolved to a franchise model. We recognize that we're going to have many stores across the province. We submitted for 10 RSAs on Monday. So we are playing big. Yeah. And we also have some franchises have already signed up with us. So I think we're going to be playing with the big boys. I think a lot of the bigger players in the space are looking at us like, how the hell are these guys pulling this off? I mean, it's like the David versus Goliath story. That's us. And we're scrappy, right? We're rolling through sleeves. We're working 18, 20 hours a day. Yeah. We got a team behind us that believes in us, right? So people are buying into the Sessions brand, the Sessions concept. So we've actually shone away a little bit from consulting now, because for us to do that, we have to turn our back to our own brand. If somebody wants to come along and work with Sessions and be part of that community, come along. If you're looking to do your own thing, then at this point in time, we're just really not that focused on that. I wish we had more time and energy to help. We do really want to see this product be available more across the province. We hope to do that on our own, and if people want to join that mission with us, come along.
Well, let's talk about that. What do you look for in a franchisee? Like, when are you looking for sector experience? Does being a retailer outweigh that? What role does passion play? Cultural fit, all those things.
Passion's everything at this point in time, right? I think people often underestimate what it takes to be successful in retail. It can often be a grind. It's a tough role. So we look for people that are passionate, that have skin in the game, that really want to see this industry. Hopefully they have experience in the industry, or at least being a consumer and passionate about it. So passion's the biggest thing we look for in that respect. And obviously if people have great locations that are available, that's an important consideration too, because we know in the long run, real estate's going to play an important role in this journey, right? But passion, real estate, knowledge, and just making sure it's a good fit, because we're going to have to work together. And I use the analogy, we're only as good as the last reference that we receive. So we want to make sure that we have good business rapport with that person, that we can coach them, train them on all the knowledge that we've learned, and pass that knowledge on to make them tremendously successful.
Well, let's talk about the industry, and let's talk about Ontario a little bit. It's been an interesting journey, to say the least. We were talking about that again off mic. What advice do you have for regulators, distributors, LPs? If there's, as from your perspective of actually being a retailer, you've got great experience in a very nascent market. What advice do you have? If you could give them 3 pieces of advice, and that's a big question, right, for the regulator and the LP. But let's sum it all up, and if you could do 3 things a little differently to help you and your fellow retailers, what would that be? Yeah,
it's a tough one. I mean, I shared this experience before. I mean, I wouldn't want to be in the shoes of the Alcohol Gaming Commission, because they do have some tough decisions to play, and they have to balance regulations, making sure the right people are operators in the province. So I think I've seen a natural evolution that's been positive. I think certainly along the way it's been a little bit clunky, but again, if you look at it from hindsight 2020, it's hard. You can't always see all the variables. But I think now that the market's opening up, I think it's very positive. I would say from as the market opens, it's a little bit unclear about how the government's going to allocate these 20 stores per month, which they're promising to do. I wish there was more knowledge.
More transparency in the process.
I think often people try to game it whereby they'll put, I'm ready by March 3rd. I've heard rumblings that people are already being contacted to open up, and they're not even close. Versus an honest guy like ourselves, we put a realistic date that we know we're going to be ready, so that we don't waste their time. One thing I don't want to do is have an inspector from the AGCO come in and say, why did you call me? You haven't even started construction.
What am I doing?
Right? So I want to be mindful of taxpayers' dollars, but I don't want to do what's gaming, right? So I wish there was a bit more framework around that. From an LP perspective, I talked a bit about before this notion of the confidence intervals of the product, right? So consistency, right? I think some companies have got to the point where they're putting Boveda packs in their product to make sure it's a bit more moist, which I think the black market consumer is more used to. I think they need to focus on good product. I think a lot of people are just trying to flood the market with a lot of product and have a lot of SKUs. I don't know if that's a good solution. Again, since me entering the space in January to today, that order sheet has grown tremendously, right? So it makes it a lot more difficult for for a retailer to pick what they want. And again, if you just focus on the basics,
so it's funny because in one way it's what everyone wanted.
Yes.
I want more choice. Because you do get to build your own merchandising assortment. On the other hand, don't proliferate for the sake of proliferation somewhere in the middle there.
You got it. Yeah, and it's hard. I think everybody's trying to fight for market segments in the cannabis too, and they call something quality product, and maybe it's not so much quality, right? Just how they're positioning. So, retailers are forced to learn from that experience, but it's getting much better. A lot of the highly desirable product is still on allocation, which makes it tricky for us. I always use the analogy, if I'm a grocery store, one week I'm ordering Shreddies from my shelves, and the next week I order Lucky Charms because I can't get Shreddies again. Like it's kind of weird at this stage, but I think
time will solve that.
The progression.
Right? Time is going to solve that.
Very positive. Yeah. And the other thing I'd say from Ontario Cannabis Store perspective, and I believe they tried to tackle this problem, but this notion of receiving old product, right? I order product, spend a tremendous amount of money on that, and I order a lot of it, and I get it, and it's like 11 months old in some cases.
Aged inventory.
Right? So my consumer doesn't want it. What do I do, right? This notion of return policies, both from if it's old from them, or if a consumer buys a product, how to get that back to the LP to refund me the money, that process hasn't quite evolved where it should be. So that's kind of 3 feedback from every kind of lens.
Listen, it's just great feedback because, as you get into the real, these are nuts and bolts merchandising, running a retail store kind of issues. They happen in all channels, one way, shape, or another.
And it's a new industry, right? Like I said, we're at base camp. We haven't even got to the summit yet, so we got a long ways to go before we see this evolve.
A couple of last questions. I was looking downstairs. You got a selection of edibles merchandise down there. Has the feedback been good so far on the product? Yeah. I've heard great things about demand. Anyway,
it's been high demand. I think it serves a really good market for new consumers that maybe don't want to inhale smoke or inhale something along as they're looking for an alternative. So my wife, as an example, is not a cannabis smoker, but she's happy to try an edible, right? So I think that's really helped. I think it's brought new people in that are exploring, things like oils and capsules and
the
edibles.
Food quality. The ultimate irony. I was just at a big restaurant show, right? And it was all about people want to know what's in the product on the shelf. I'm like, well, where do you buy your edibles that you don't know that? Why would you? How do you reconcile those two things in your life? That you're buying product from an unregulated source. And then, so I guess what I'm saying is, I'm very optimistic about that because you've got this dovetail into the broader themes of I want to know who's making my product, exactly what's in it, what's the ingredient deck, have confidence in not just the retailer,
it's a safer alternative to the black market. Right? I think a lot of people go in the black market. It says it's 100 milligrams, but I've heard rumors that there's tests out there that it's proven that the stuff that there's no regulations around it, right? So of course you're going to market it as if you want to sell it, right?
And and the other thing I think where the win is taste matters.
Yes.
Right. And so tasting, you go back to consistency, right? I want my chocolate bar to taste like it did.
Yes. So from a quality of product from edibles, I've tried a lot of these products myself. I think they've been very good. I've been pleasantly surprised. The chocolates have been great. The gummies have been great. So the quality's there. These companies have partnered with really established companies. Like look at something like chocolate. A lot of these companies have partnered. A lot of the LPs have partnered with really sophisticated chocolate companies because that's not their wheelhouse, right?
Sure.
So it's been quite pleasant in that respect. I think the criticism that we often get from a retail perspective is the dosage is just not there, right? It's a low dosage. But again, for the average normal consumer coming in, it's the right mix. If you're a heavy consumer, it's probably not for you.
And that's probably the bit of the I wouldn't say the miss, but you've already talked about I go for the higher THC than lower. So you've got a product group that's
but you know what? Kudos to the government because the phase 2 products also included vape pens, and vape pens have been another alternative to smoking cannabis, and they've been a really big hit too. From a feedback perspective on regulations, that's been a whole messy world, right? So
it still is in Alberta, right? First they delayed the launch, and now they've tagged them with a 20%.
Not just that, but also if you look at something like Ontario, there's a Smoke Free Act, and so the Alcohol Gaming Commission doesn't speak with that body of government, and then retailers are getting confused about how to manage this. Apparently, you can only have a picture on display, but nobody can validate that. In case of Toronto, apparently they've introduced some new licensing coming in April 1st, so it's like the left hand's not telling the right hand. So, in a retailer, we're kind of stuck trying to navigate these murky waters. But again, it's a new industry, and that's what you can come to expect, right?
Right on. So, a last question. I think you've already hinted at it. What's next? You've got a couple of stores on the dock on the website, so that's an easy one for. Well, that's a layup question for me. I already know you got a couple. But what's if we were having this interview, you and I sitting down chatting 18 months from today, 24 months, what would that look like?
Sessions Cannabis is on the rise, man. We're growing really, really fast. Like I said, we submitted for 10 RSA. So we're a bit of a sleeper. People don't realize we're coming out there. We're coming to get the big guys, right? So we've been at this thick and thin. We've got stores opening up Cambridge, several in Hamilton. We've got some in Windsor, Orillia, Brockville, Ottawa. So we're all across this province, and we have some deals being worked on right now up north too in Sault Ste. Marine area. So we're growing this thing extremely fast, and I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised when they see us come out with the gloves of swinging, right? We're scrappy dudes.
Well, listen, thanks for making the time to chat with me. You're busy guy, obviously, and appreciate your insights and sharing. So thanks for being on the Voice of Retail podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Corey, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
Well, great, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's a real treat. You and I have not had the opportunity to meet, but I have had the opportunity to meet and, in fact, interview Lisa from your Niagara store, your partner in Niagara. Wonderful store. I visited it a couple of months ago, and I was so grateful that I had the chance to speak to you and get your perspective as well. So why don't we kick it off with dive right in and tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal, professional journey, and up to and included what attracted you into the cannabis space and your role at Choom.
Yeah, hey, absolutely. And again, thanks for the time. I mean, for me, I'm one of those lifelong retailers. I feel like somehow that is, some people want to grow up to be an astronaut. I think I did when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and then wind up in retail, and it ends up being the best thing that ever happened to you. So. I think my career started quite young. Came in the better part of my retail career. Anyway, it was started out here on the West Coast in Vancouver with Walmart, where I spent the better part of about 18 and a half years, both domestically, a stint in their international business as well. Really kind of, came through the store side of the business, but three kind of functional areas that I would say that were consider my background there over that period of time. Large, scale operations came through the business, came through multiple stores and store locations along the way, but ended up running the largest operational unit in the country, which was the Western unit here is based in Calgary at the time. Which was, I guess that to me that always kind of checked off the scale metric that only Walmart does. That was big business, a $7 billion P&L, and over 100 stores and 20 odd thousand associates. So it's a big business. It's certainly kind of I realized at that time that probably one of the largest. There's a good chance I'm never going to work for a company of that scale again.
For sure.
And then moved into to the M&A side on the international business for a couple of years. Really kind of helping, for the most part, looking at the time Walmart was trying to grow its top line business by acquiring healthy businesses abroad, for lack of a better definition. And for me, my role in that was helping support the valuation model for an acquisition and kind of what the value would be from an operational side of things. And actually ended up joining one of those acquisitions in sub-Saharan Africa. Moved down to Johannesburg for a better part of 2 years, and kind of led the integration of in the scale of Walmart, a fairly small acquisition. It was about a $6 billion US business called Massmart, which was really kind of a holdings company of multiple retailers. Nothing that really kind of looked like a Walmart by any stretch. Anything from DIY to high-end electronics, as an example, to some wholesale businesses, but spread out throughout sub-Saharan Africa, and spent the better part of 2 years. Essentially kind of focused on the integration side of it with a few other expats of functional areas. Came through there and ended up coming back to the Canadian business and joined the digital side of the business. So went into to Walmart.ca, which was a bit of a startup, scrappy kind of model. It was essentially set up separate to the mothership of Walmart Canada.
Yeah,
and
I remember those days. I remember those days well.
Free shipping everywhere.
My toothpaste. It was a great source of my toothpaste.
Fantastic. And it ended up kind of leading, kind of bridging both sides. So the omni-channel side of the business, but I guess kind of both physical and digital side of the organization. So did that for a better part of a couple of years, kind of supporting a new store, super center, if you will, reinvention of that as an example, and then kind of just leading the commercial side of the website. So kind of certainly kind of a nice touch in terms of kind of rounding my time there. And then from there, I was living in Toronto at the time, which for me, I think was about the 9th city that I lived in throughout my career at Walmart. Which had been a really nice run for me, and I was still quite young, feeling old today, but for the most part, had an opportunity to meet a founder of a business that was based here in Vancouver, and always wanted my attention to be here. So I was kind of torn between what to do and where to go, and whether I wanted to stay and continue with the career at Walmart, or do I want to try and get back to Vancouver and do something maybe with a different business, take that pedigree that you'd learned with a Fortune kind of 1 company and apply it somewhere else. And so met a fellow named Brian Hill, heads up, as a founder and CEO of the Aritzia business. And, I kind of was about 6 months prior to that business going public. Not a huge history of I guess, focusing on talent that was external for the most part of the time, very much an internal leadership team as an organization. My role there was to help kind of build scalable infrastructure for the retail side, prior to going public, and then really focusing on right-sizing stores at the time, and then a big focus on U.S. expansion.
Brian is such a savvy operator, so I could see how you'd be attracted to the opportunity, and they've done so well. He was on the Retail Council of Canada main stage. Joe Mimram, we had Joe Mimram interview him. What a great conversation! I had the chance to meet and talk with Brian as well. He's, as I said, such a savvy operator. Yeah,
it was certainly a good test of dexterity, I suppose. It's a lot of people, I think, have that bridge when you come from a larger organization. Can you go to a smaller organization and flourish? And so at my time, coming in, was a very successful period of time with Aritzia, and somebody that for me was someone I could learn from, but also I consider now certainly a friend, but also a mentor, and was helpful in kind of developing a different side of my skill set, which I think is kind of now really well balanced into moving into more of a startup kind of business like Choom.
You make such a great point about the transition being what I've sometimes described as a small cog in a very big machine, and sometimes I've seen where you move to a more nimble startup and you just don't have that infrastructure around you, and it's not the perfect fit for everyone. So I just wanted to deke off a little bit, because I've seen a lot of people in the retail industry, and I expect to see more now that retail cannabis getting a bit of a wind under its sails finally, certainly in Ontario. What's your advice to someone, professionals who are moving from the retail, let's call it traditional retail, non-cannabis retail, into the retail cannabis space? You've made that move. What's your advice to them in terms of considering a move into what from the outside and I hope from the inside is an exciting element of retail?
Well, hey, listen. One side of me says, I just say put your helmet on. I think
get ready.
Yeah, get ready. But on a more serious note, I think my advice is this: I've really kind of tried to not only emphasize this externally where we can, whether it's talking to investors or other industry people, but certainly how we've kind of built the team is to not really think about. I think at the early onset of cannabis, retail cannabis, we were using the word cannabis first, and in no other kind of ideal would that make sense. We're a retailer that sells cannabis, and I think retail fundamentals apply here. So I think once you start to figure, to make sure, my advice would be that really is first and foremost what you kind of need to be able to put into to place. And I think from just the experiences that I've had is, and maybe it's just the type of individual. If you are, the ability to be flexible, mostly from a leadership standpoint, you need to be extremely curious and not accept what you've just heard in many ways, and that doesn't underpin a trust piece. It's just things continually change all the time, and I think in this space, it is you just got to be agile, and I think first and prioritize. So I think it's probably a few things unbucketed there, but yeah, it's an interesting industry, an interesting sector. But I think for the retail people coming over, it's not unlike any other retail sector. You're selling a different product, and it is certainly. Has different levels of regulation, but there's areas of retail to have that too.
I often say, and I've heard it said when talking to retail cannabis CEOs, it's like that Mike Tyson quote, right? It's everybody's got a plan till I punch him in the face, and then the plan changes, and then everything moves around. Let's talk about Choom. So as I mentioned off the top, I've been into your location in Niagara Falls, which I believe was a partnership with one of the Ontario lottery winners. But tell us about Choom. Structure, scale, scope. Tell us a bit about that brand and how you craft that brand into a retail merchandising strategy.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I came into Choom in September as the president. Kind of certainly moved into the CEO role in about December, just pending some of the due diligence things that need to be done from a government standpoint. And at that time, we're about 4 or 5 stores deep, and so we got a few things underway at that point. Today, we sit with 15 stores. Open and operating, 3 under construction, spread between 14 in Alberta, currently 2 under construction as well there, 1 in Niagara, which is great to see. And certainly Lisa and her team have done a fantastic job and been a great partner. I actually just had a chance to meet her for breakfast last week. In Toronto, and then 1 under BC that we've got under construction, which is a flagship for us here. For us, it is, it's been an evolution in brand and in business. And I think with each store, we're more and more excited about the next store as far as the development that's underway. And listen, we're a story brand. We're a business that is founded, or the story is essentially founded on, the Hawaiian theme and the Choom Gang, which essentially is a group of buddies back in Honolulu in the 70s. That essentially was a pot smoking group of friends, and I think for us, one of the things that attracted me to Choom was this brand and this ability to kind of to play it out and build into certainly. And when the word Choom in itself is essentially the meaning is to indulge in pakalolo, and to the understanding of the word pakalolo is the Hawaiian word for cannabis. So if you're kind of hitting the choom or you're smoking some choom, you're kind of in this particular world, you're having to us, if you can start to remove the word or use the word essentially like the product, like a Kleenex, is very aspirational. Choom kind of fits that model for us. So we kind of focus on not only the story, the gang, the word, lots of symbolism, more and more as we start to build out our story. Whether it be kind of surfboards, the Choom wagon that certainly we start to see installations in stores now, and we're just kind of threading that through particularly our in-store experience, underpinned by our in-store educators to not only tell that story but also kind of play a part of it as we continue to grow.
Well, it's a great segue into kind of the question I have about culture, which plays such an important role in your brand story. But I'd imagine it plays such an important role in who you hire, how you hire, and then as you think about stores, as you open them up, how to translate what is a very colorful and picturesque, so to speak. It gets a real picture in my mind into what the store actually looks like and how it's merchandised and who you hire. So given talking to a lot of people about culture trumping strategy, what do you look for in the people, and how do you approach in-store design to reflect the culture and the brand story you want to achieve?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things probably to unpack in that. If I just kind of maybe just give you an overall kind of ethos in terms of maybe how, from a cultural standpoint, to me, it's always been 3 things that have served me well, and certainly now as being essentially, employee number 1, essentially at Choom now, as we kind of reiterated that, and what kind of message you want to set from tone you want to set from the top. So there's been 3 things. I think having an organization where everyone has a say, to me is critical, and that's regardless of level, that everyone has the ability to voice their opinion. The second piece, in terms of just a cultural ethos, is that we need to have clear work contract. And what I mean by that, it's very, very clear, and it's one of the things that certainly I would have taken away from my time with Brian at Aritzia is it's very important to understand what it is that people are doing. And so just kind of, our first kind of for 2 weeks of onboarding people into, whether it be stores in here at the office, it is getting a very, very clear of the what that they're going to be doing in that kind of expectation setting. And then finally, the third bit is diversity. I think that I think about teams that are successful have both men and women on the team as an example, and ideally in a very equal participant. So I think just those certain things from an ethos standpoint that we focus on, and certainly that I'd like to say that we live by.
I hear echoes about the Walmart ethos of basically there's no cash registers at head office. We're store support. That the store matters. Is that Brian? I think Brian also feels that that's such importance of what happens in the store to reflect and empower the people, and also give them the here is exactly what we expect of you. But then at the same time, you're just such an important part of the culture. It's really you can really see that threading through what some of the things you've been describing. When I think about last couple of questions, when I think about the path forward, where you get to be a merchant again, in other words, in the early days of retail cannabis was I'll sell whatever they can get my hands on, but now you get to make some decisions about what you're going to sell and what you're going to represent. And I talk to different cannabis retailers about how they're starting now to think about that. What's your perspective on differentiating by product and assortment? Do you think there's a role for that for Choom?
Yeah, I mean, from our side, if I back it up a little bit, when I first kind of came into Choom and understand a little bit about the sector and a little bit about kind of doing your due diligence, if you will, around the markets and so on. The one thing that stood out to me, I mean, there's just a ton of parity. That are generally differentiating for retailers. So, I mean, the kind of obvious ones certainly are from a product perspective. We all buy the product, at least in the markets that we play, from the same place at the same cost with no benefit scale. So there's it's like map pricing. Oh, right, and you pay it before you pay. There's no terms. I should also
there you go. No terms, map pricing. Go compete.
So from and quite honestly, and we were a 2-category business really up until quite recently. So I mean it was dried flower and pre-rolls. I mean that pretty much is the business. And to your point, the assortment's quite light. So I think where we started to pivot to and play. And this is the fun part. So you certainly be able to play a much more of a direct merchant role across all areas. Is kind of looking at where is the from a week to week, where's the assortment that we want to be able to carry, and that assortment now is being where it was quite simple before, and now the breadth has increased significantly, not only with new categories, with many more SKUs. Yep. So from our standpoint, Choom is there's two things. One very very tactical side is from it's not as old adage in retail is the 80-20 rule. That a very small group of your items is going to make up most of your business. And from our perspective, we go really deep into our purchasing of that product, into our assortment, threading that back through. So we would call that our never be out product item list. And that produces the better part of our sales, to be honest with you. So we're starting to, as we start to enact that in the past, couple of months, we're starting to see the returns for that now and starting to build up the inventory in the right product. And so we'll go across, whether it be, dried flower to pre-rolls. Vapes are still just a little bit too new to kind of really put our backing of exact items that we want to have. And then from there, we took that at a very macro approach, and now looking at it a little bit more on a customizable, so letting the data kind of tell the story from there, and test, learn, and adapt essentially in our inventory, in our merchandise assortment. So we focus that from an enabler is from a central standpoint. So we do much of that so that our stores don't have to think about what it is that they need to order. So more of a kind of specialized central model. And then kind of filter out to the stores that here's what should be on the order sheet each week. Here's what's on the order sheet this week. This is the never be out items that we want to order in stores because we've got data that supports that these items are right. We have a certain margin mix that's associated with those products, and then the items that kind of fill up anything above our core. And then we leave a certain amount of products to the store manager to play, the empowered merchant and take some risk.
Bit of regional customization, right?
Absolutely, and it's interesting some of the things that have kind of come back from it, and the adage in retail that that has been true no matter where I've been ever is a really great store manager. You always have a great store. And for us, we see that where we have really, really strong merchant store managers that are excited about the product, excited about their clients, we see really great results from. And so having that bit of, hey, you want, command and control from the center saying, do this because the data supports it, but also leaving flexibility that says, hey, you know what, we don't know everything, nor should we.
And your store, your region may have different preferences, right? BC may be different than Ontario in some lines of business. Interesting. So speaking of Ontario, it looks like I was on your site and looking at your growth objectives. You're looking like you're making a big bet in Ontario. I think I read 75 stores. So tell me a little bit about not your growth objectives, because it's pretty clear you've got a path forward in that. But what do you think it's going to take? If there's any barriers, or if there's things that could be better from either your suppliers, so the LPs, or from government? What are those kind of 1, 2, or even 3 things that need to happen to really accelerate and optimize this retail concept, this retail channel? Yeah,
I think the first part of the question from a store projection, we've kind of I've looked at the store growth of Choom into a bit of a portfolio mix, and the 3 provinces that we play in, we want to focus on those 3 provinces: Alberta, BC, and Ontario. And we will shore up our 17 stores, which we kind of have in our 3-year plan in Alberta, and then stop. And not stop because, to us, it's just we'll continue to look for opportunity. But we don't, I think of likened to our leadership sometimes is that there seemed to be a bit of an Oklahoma land rush happening in Alberta, everyone running at 100 miles an hour to the same proverbial cliff. And I believe Choom stopped. And I think what we're seeing in the marketplace in some of these stores now is you've got a tail of 35 stores. That's very difficult to be able to, carry that cash flow to buy inventory every week if you're not, essentially with the amount of competition. So I'll say that, is we'll check, put a green check on our portfolio there. From a BC perspective, we're allowed 8 locations as a total for any one entity provincially. We have 2 stores that we have development permits for. So I'd say we're one under construction, a flagship for us in Olympic Village here in the downtown core, not far from our offices. And so we kind of see that as the next kind of immediate phase in that portfolio. And then at the same time, overlapping is into Ontario. Which in our 3-year plan, we put closer, 75 certainly, I think is where the province has allowed any one retailer. So certainly we kind of put ourselves there. But from our perspective, we've put 40 stores across the next 3 years. And for us, we've put in the 4 to 6 this year. Would be nice. 4 would be fantastic. But at this point, we don't know. We've applied for RSAs, which are our store authorizations. On Monday of this week, which is the first day to do that, with some really really great locations. Liberty Village kind of being a flagship location that we hope to be first on our list. And then coming out of what has been Choom's focus had been initially from a real estate standpoint, Michael had been really focused on rural. We're moving much more future state into urban, suburban. So you'll likely see us pop up not only in kind of urban and play that halo effect, but a suburban model, which for the other locations we picked up in Kitchener, Hamilton, and Ottawa, we're right next to a Walmart. So we put ourselves in our suburban. And in order to win Ontario, you need to win great power centers.
Not unlike where you are in Niagara, right? You're basically in a power center in Niagara Falls, right?
Exactly. So I think from numbers, perspective, hopefully that gives a little bit more clarity. From the second part of the question of what needs to happen, I think in the industry, I think first and foremost, I talked about that assessment period I had early on. There was a real lack of professionalization, for lack of a better definition. I think that I'm seeing that improve. You see that in the LP side of things, kind of early on. You start to see some changes potentially happening through those businesses, and quite honestly into the retail. So I think continued professionalization of the industry is going to be critical. The second bit is I really think the government needs to step aside and unlock roadblocks rather than create more. And I think from that seems to be the only way it could go at this point. So, and I think the third bit is access to capital. That those three things I think would help support this industry. And I was on a roadshow, just kind of marketing the business a bit the last week in Toronto, New York. And one of the a couple of comments that I would have made throughout was, as you're kind of telling people either new to the space or hearing about the Choom or Canadian recreational space for the first time. And it says, I'd say that we're a pure play retailer, and the same things that plague retail don't plague cannabis retail. In fact, that makes sense. We've got a lot of demand. There is no Amazon, that sort of thing. Sure. And I think then
you got good store traffic, which is hard to come by in traditional retail. And
absolutely, and I think the second bit is from a what plagues cannabis. As far as a bit of a dark cloud at times, doesn't necessarily plague retail cannabis. So I think
that's a very important distinction, because I've found, particularly in the last 6 months, this it's almost a stigma on top of a stigma where the cannabis, that's not a great business. I'm like, actually, it's a great business, but over exuberance in the LP side has maybe colored your perceptions a bit, right? I think your observation is spot on.
Yeah. So that's kind of it. And, I think, like I said, I think we're, we have had, like I said, where we have built stores, we do it in the right location. We do it in the right way. We're successful. And, we just came off of a record week of business on top of a record week of business. With for the organization, and from a margin perspective too, where we're starting to see that mix more strategic than it has been in the past. And so, sitting in my seat, there's 100 million things to do. Certainly, there's probably 2 or 3 that we can do well. And we'll continue to keep banging those things out.
Well, Corey, thanks so much for spending time with me, and congratulations on your past success, and even up to in terms of how the business is going to grow. Such a professional operator. So thanks so much again for spending time with the Voice of Retail. It's great to have insight into your business, and I look forward to meeting you in person soon, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Well, thanks to Stephen and Corey for being my guests in this episode. Now, let's hit the highlights of the retail news in Canada and around the world with Retail This Week for the week of March 23rd, 2020. And of course, COVID stories dominate the news, but we try to have a variety of different stories here. First of all, what do we lead off with? The grocery guys are getting just slammed with orders and then trying to adjust to that. Small, large, medium grocers all trying to figure out, basically grapple, as it's described in this article in the Montreal Gazette, with huge demand for delivery service. You see them hiring, trying to react. It's like hit them like a shockwave with so many people ordering online. We'll see how many of that or how much that sticks in the weeks and months and years to come. I think what you're going to probably see is, they will not stay at the same intense velocity, but it's certainly not going to be where it was before. So it's certainly going to be a big step up from even a year ago. From the Globe and Mail, malls closing, shops deserted, retail tenants seek rent relief. This from the Globe and Mail, as I said. And some landlords have been very proactive. Gage Depot, which is Ivanhoe, Cambridge, has been very forward in terms of providing relief. Listen, at the end of the day, provide relief or there's nobody standing behind them. So if you want any one of these retailers left standing, you better, I'm speaking of the landlords, you better get it together because putting them out of business with April rents or whatever when they have no revenue is not going to lead to good things in the months to come. Changes in effect for grocery stores during the coronavirus pandemic. This is an article from Mississauga.com, which is a Toronto Star paper, and it lists all the different changes from store hours to processes to all kinds of different plexiglass screens, all the things that the grocers across the country are doing to make it safer for everyone to shop. The reduced hours allows the shelves to be restocked when no one's around, and more cleaning. I think I saw Professor Charlebois say, by the end of this, grocery stores are going to be as clean as surgery operating rooms, and I don't doubt that assessment. From Globe Mail, Canada Post announces a new service procedure. So I heard actually this from the great folks at Canada Post about a couple of weeks ago, or a week and a half ago, where they talked about their changes. Knock, drop, and go. In other words, they're not doing signature at the door anymore, asking people do not open the door and greet the friendly Canada Post men and women as much as you want to. They just want to knock, drop, and go. So if you're expecting an order from Canada Post, expect to see that experience. A couple of videos. London drug CEO surprised by COVID-19 toilet paper hoarding. That's the great Clay Malman talking there, so don't miss that video. And then, what else? Oh, I'm on the video. I did a great interview. Not a great interview, but I did a great topic interview, so to speak, with Vancouver Global News, talking about unpacking the supply chain and why and how the supply chain works, kind of taking it one level deeper, just beyond there's a powerful supply chain, and explaining the, over the past 20 years, the centralization with powerful networks, transportation distribution systems, which I think will do us very well in the months to come. What else we got? Let's see. Canada-U.S. border remains open to retailers. From our friends at CN Rail. It's a good article from cn.ca just about how the goods are indeed flowing. I mean, if you think about it, I was speaking to one vendor, actually, whose product just arrived from Italy today, because it's been waylaid from the CN Rail blockages earlier in the year. So, again, as I often and will repeat, there's lots of food in this country. It just needs to get to the right place at the right time. Retail around the world. Exit interview with Helena Folks, talking about what she learned about retail leadership as CEO of HBC. So HBC now gone private, and she's made her mark and on her way. So it's an interesting article from Forbes. Lowe's CEO Marvin Ellison talks about how people, while they're home, starting to take on those home projects that they kind of been putting off or just hadn't had the opportunity to do. So that's an interesting angle. Amazon closes U.S. apparel returns warehouse amid worker alarm. So interesting, Amazon warehouses and many other retailers. It's so big they have specialized warehouses, and this one does just nothing but returns. And there's some risk there, and it just this article from Bloomberg talks about Kroger, GameStop stop accepting returns and extending to their customers extended returns policies, which is probably a good idea. Neiman Marcus mulling bankruptcy. I think you're going to see a lot of stories like this. I'm going to be telling you a lot of these stories. That's from Retail Dive. Neiman Marcus has been kind of teetering along with a ton of private equity debt for years now, and then this may be what pushes them over the brink. These kind of shocks. From Bloomberg, half of Chinese retailers risk it collapse within 6 months. China certainly had its difficulties starting off, and it's starting to come out of the other side, but you kind of get a glimpse of the future. Half of Chinese retailers risk collapse within 6 months. Pretty sobering. Independent retailers, this is a story from the Ottawa Citizen. Customers responded to Glebe Bookstore's blunt appeal for help. Basically, this bookstore owner is basically saying, listen, I've been around for 40 years. I won't be around for 41 unless you start buying books. This is Octopus Books in Ottawa. And I think you're going to see a lot of that, and I'll try and report on that in the Voice of Retail. Small business survivor mode turns to e-commerce as coronavirus spreads. I was interviewed for this one, actually, Yahoo Finance. My point in the article when we talk about small business is for many of them, just being where they are and having great service has meant that they really haven't focused on e-commerce for all the right reasons. But now that the stores are closed, if they're not an essential service, now's a pretty good time, in my advice, to start an e-commerce site. Maybe, who knows, e-commerce is allowed, for example, in Ontario. You might not be selling what is deemed essential service, but e-commerce is and still continues. So maybe you do some pick from store inventory. You leave it out in front of the store. Have people come pick it up, or use Purolator or whoever to deliver it. So I think now is the time for many to think about it. And the times, versus 10, 15 years ago, the technology is actually pretty much the easy part when you got Shopify or these Shopify sites that you could build up pretty easily. That's no longer the hard part. The text, so to speak, the easy part. Figuring out what, where, and how is the harder part. 7 Toronto bookstores doing delivery, plus their quarantine reading recommendations. That's from Toronto Life. Good article on what the bookstores are doing. We just had a great episode about 2 great cannabis leaders. So I threw in this article, New Cannabis Store Opens in the Byward Market, from my hometown in Ottawa Citizen. From the Ottawa Citizen, 3,000 square foot Hobo, part of Hobo's 15-store Ontario expansion. I'll have to get those folks on the podcast and see what they're thinking and what's next. Last section, COVID strategy lessons learned. So some great articles here that you should pay attention to. Some from Retail Insider, these big thinkers. Retail Profit, Doug Stevens has his take. Kantar, great thought leaders there. Macmillan Doolittle out of Chicago, DAC Group. All of these people are in this section of the e-news. You can subscribe for free on retailcouncil.org, where I'm trying to find who are the thought leaders thinking about what are the changes that are happening today, and how are those going to impact us, and how do we think about the future, as we go through this, what I've called a 3-phase process, this shock that we're in right now. Eventually it's going to settle into the new business as unusual for, who knows, weeks, months, and then we'll have to reboot the entire economy and entire retail infrastructure. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about this 3-phase, I love my threes, approach to what's going on. Well, that's a wrap on this edition of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcast platform, including Spotify, one of my favorites. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of ME LeBlanc Company Inc. You can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co, or of course on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.